Please make her feel welcome.
Thank you, Chantel, and all the people at Voices of Faith for including me. When the Boston Globe broke their award-winning series on the sexual abuse of children by Catholic priests and the cover-up by church officials, the survivor movement in the United States was quite small. We communicated by snail mail and an occasional gathering. In 2002, all that changed. We in SNAP couldn't answer our phones quickly enough. As fast as we cleared our voicemail, it refilled. Photos, recordings, letters, snail mail poured in. We went from being overwhelmed to being completely buried. How did I get involved? I was a good Catholic, very involved in my parish. Our 6 kids were attending the parish school, and I was the school's gym teacher. I live in the parish where I grew up. My children were attending the school that I had attended. My grandparents are all immigrants. 2 are from Italy, 2 are from Ireland. So you know how devoutly I was raised. I went to Mass every morning. The church was the center of our lives. It was our social life. It was our calendar. We went from Lent to Easter, baptisms, First Communions. One day, a parish priest, who was also my best friend Joni's uncle, called my mother and asked her to send me to church to help him. You can imagine how proud Mom was that her daughter had been a special helper. She told me to put on my very best dress and my Mary Janes, those little black shoes, and go to Father. Well, I was a tomboy, and I really hated those Mary Janes. So I decided I'd wear my favorite brown shoes because they matched the trim on my dress. This is the dress I was wearing that day, and you can see it matches the brown trim. I went to church. Father told me I was an evil child, that he had been sent by God to save my soul. He raped me, and I believed rape was the punishment for wearing brown shoes. I didn't know what he had done to me. I knew it hurt. I knew I was terrified, and I knew I didn't want my parents to find out just how evil I was. If you had forced me to describe what happened, all I could have said was, Father jumped up and down on me. I was only 6. I didn't know the word rape and had no idea what sex was. The abuse continued for the next 6 or 7 years. Father was raping and sodomizing Joni, me, and others. As we got older, he began to invite other priests to join him. I did everything in my power to keep my parents from finding out. I did everything in my power to make the rape stop. I tried to be good, but I was never good enough. I cut off all my hair. It didn't happen to boys. It only happened to girls. 6-year-old logic. There was nowhere I was safe from him. He would call the nuns. They would send me from school to his bedroom. He'd take me out of church. He'd find me on the playground. He'd just call my mother. She would send me to him. I spent my childhood looking for a safe place. Like any good predator, he made me complicit in his crimes. Many times, predators use drugs, alcohol, pornography, and the children know these are illegal. So if they use them, everything that happens, everything is their fault. Father told me that if I would pray to God with a pure heart, the rapes wouldn't hurt, because God would never let an innocent child suffer. The rapes hurt. Proof I was evil. In some ways, I'm one of the luckier ones. The abuse started when I was very young, and nobody except the bishop has ever accused me of being a sexual temptress. For the older kids, this has been harder, especially for the girls. The words that are used are relationship and affair, rather than sexual assault and crimes and violence. Father never told me he loved me. He never told me I was special. He never brought me a present. But many predators do. and the kids are left to try and sort out the confusion of the good memories from the bad memories. As an adult, I realized people had to have known. That rectory had a housekeeper, a secretary, a cook, other priests. What did they think he was doing with a child in his bedroom? Why would they remain silent? This may sound sort of crazy, but it was almost a relief when he was abusing me. The waiting was over, and I knew for a day or two I would be safe. When he finally stopped, I repressed all memory of the abuse. In 1991, a new young priest was assigned to our parish. He was on the playground with me every morning. He wanted to know the kids' names, all about them. He played with them. He brought them treats. He came to gym class and took part in our games. I was thrilled. But after a few months, the older kids began saying, "Don't let him play. Make him go away. We don't want him." A rather odd reaction to a priest who wanted to be their friend. Walking home one afternoon, I asked the older kids, "Okay, guys, tell me, why do you hate Rothschild?" And one boy said, "He always asks you who's kissing who and who loves who." And the next boy said, "He's always at the Gannon's house, a family with 3 little girls." And then the girl looked at me and said, "He always touches you." I knew he had favorites. He liked little blonde girls, 5, 6, 7 years old. The way he hugged them made me very uncomfortable. I'd seen him with a little girl in his lap, and I was uneasy, but I never said or did anything. After talking with the kids, I began to watch him more closely. In gym class, he picked up a little girl, and he began to fondle her right in front of me. He made no attempt to hide it. When I went toward him to grab the child, he put her down and ran away. Being a good Catholic, I went to my pastor rather than just picking up the phone and calling the police. A huge mistake. They told me he would be gone by morning, they would get him help, they would make sure he was away from kids, and they would help the family of the little girl. None of it was true. He was back on the playground the very next morning, and I was instructed, watch him carefully and report back if he molests anyone else. Thus began my education on the cover-up by church officials. They never denied he was abusing. The chancellor looked at me and said, "Well, he's only fondling, and the kids are too young to testify in court." This is when I realized they had played the game many times before, and I was just learning. The final straw for me came when I talked to a friend who was a priest, and I told him what I was dealing with. And he looked at me and he says, "Little girls? Why, Barb, it's always been little boys." One Sunday morning, a group of friends and I went to the parish where Father Rothschild worked to pass out leaflets to the people as they left Mass. We put information about predator priests, what to do if you suspected abuse, how to get help. I put my name and my home phone number on those leaflets. I was terrified. I had no idea what they'd do to us. Would they arrest us, chase us off the property, attack us, go after my family, my kids? Some people took the leaflets and walked away. Some people took the leaflets, balled them up, and threw them at us. Some people simply refused to take the leaflets. The pastor called the police, but we had done nothing wrong, and so they just stood by and watched us. In the next few weeks, I got phone calls from parishioners asking me why had we done this, some wanting more information about abuse, some just wanted to yell at me. I was still scared, but I had done something. I had taken an action. I'd stopped playing by the church's rules. The Pope is an absolute monarch. He doesn't need a legislation. He doesn't need the courts to make changes. He could begin today to name the complicit bishops and explain the part they have played in their cover-up. He could take their jobs, their titles, their salaries, and then he could turn over the documents to local law enforcement. He could take the documents in the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, which has collected abuse cases for decades, turn them over to local law enforcement. He could instruct the bishops to abide by the laws of the land. He could instruct the bishops to stop these internal investigations. I think language is incredibly powerful and needs to be used carefully. These are not relationships, these are not affairs, boundary violations, cultural differences, inappropriate conduct, misunderstandings. Let's call it what it is. It's sexual violence. It's criminal behavior. The Pope has chosen not to take action. Would we allow any other government, organization, or institution to internally investigate criminal behavior, to hold secret trials, to pick their own punishment? Would we allow corporate policies to supersede the laws of our land? I don't think so. In the past, it's been acceptable to own slaves, to bind women's feet. Women couldn't vote or own property. Smoking was glamorous. All that has changed, and we must add sexual violence to that list. Thank you.